And finally, it's my pleasure to talk with you about Dr. Charles Tilley, who was a graduate of the York High School class of 1946. Dr. Tilley passed away, but I want to talk to you a little bit about him and also introduce his daughter to you. Dr. Tilley was born in Lombard. He graduated from York and held a bachelor's degree and a PhD from Harvard. He was a veteran of the U.S. Navy. He taught at the University of Michigan, Harvard, Princeton, and Columbia. He was an author of 51 books, some of which he co-authored with his wife. He was a social theorist, and Dr. Tilley was the founder of something known as popular history, Mr. Ovando, which puts the focus on ordinary people, their lives, and their actions. I also loved learning that he was an avid volleyball player, traveler, and storyteller. Dr. Tilley died in 2008, and tonight it's our honor to welcome his daughter Laura and his granddaughter Charlotte, who are here with us tonight. Welcome, Laura Tilley.
There's my dad, complete with the hand gestures. That was very characteristic for him. Could you just run it continuously as a slideshow, please? Thanks. Before I talk about his career a little bit, I want to talk about him as a man, focusing on three themes in his life. The first theme is that he was a child of his times. He was born at the beginning of the Depression and came of age during World War II. After those difficult times for our country, he, like many of his peers, benefited from the rising prosperity of the post-war period. He came from a family of very modest means with recent immigrants on both sides. I think that growing up under these circumstances taught my father independence, resilience, self-discipline, and optimism. With help from his family and a lot of personal ambition, he went off to Harvard, the first person in his family to go to college, and stayed at Harvard for his PhD, and then on to a career in academia. This leads to the second theme in Chuck's life, which was an intense focus on education, both as a pathway to success and as his chosen role. My Aunt Carolyn, who's in the audience tonight, and Uncle Richard described my father in high school as an excellent student who excelled in Latin and loved language in general. One of his early ambitions was to have the longest list of extracurricular activities in the high school yearbook, and he succeeded. He was a star debater, acted in musicals, ran cross country, was in the Glee Club, and played several instruments in the band. He was a member of a barbershop quartet as well, and Carolyn tells about sneaking out of her bedroom to listen to the young men practice in the dining room until she got caught and sent back to bed. These activities helped Chuck in his future life. The debating translated into a scholarship for college, and I'm sure the theater and music helped him along the way too, as good teachers are also good performers. As an adult, he was a very enthusiastic volleyball player, usually bare-chested, as you'll see in some of the slides coming up. He was a bike rider, reader, and poet. The debate scholarship wasn't enough for college, so he joined the NROTC and later served in the Navy. His family also paid what they could for college, and he worked various part-time jobs. And I always found this fascinating. In order to save money, Chuck would package up his laundry and mail it from Cambridge to Elmhurst, where his mother would wash and press his clothes and mail them back. It's true. So Chuck's family made enormous efforts to make sure that he and later his 4 younger siblings got a good education. The third theme is the importance to Chuck of being a mentor. Unfortunately, I don't know the identity of his mentors at York High and beyond, but I know from observation how seriously he took this role with his students throughout his career. He was incredibly engaged, particularly with his graduate students, reading their papers with lightning speed and sending them back with incisive comments, counseling them to get on with it and not dwell on mistakes or failures, and helping them find jobs. Beginning in the 1970s and continuing until a few months before his death, Chuck organized weekly meetings with his current group of graduate students where they would give presentations on their work and discuss questions and issues. My mother, Louise Tilley, a social historian, would also participate along with her students. In those early years, my younger sister and I, along with the family dog, would tiptoe among the coffee cups on the floor of the living room and listen to the serious discussion at these Sunday night meetings. Actually, I have to admit, the dog was probably looking for unprotected cookies, not listening. After our father passed away, my siblings and I were stunned at the number of current and former students from around the world who wrote to express their condolences, literally hundreds, each with a heartfelt story of the impact that he had had on their lives. So what was his career as a sociologist all about? You've probably noticed on the slideshow some rather odd terms like collective action, trust networks, and contention. These were terms Chuck used in his work, which focused on explaining social movements, particularly in a historical context. He also worked on the formation of governments and broad topics such as democracy, inequality, and contentious politics. Later in his career, he turned his focus to more individualistic questions like how people explain actions to themselves and others. Aside from his creativity and gift for clear explanations, one of the distinguishing characteristics of my parents' work was their use of data to provide objective evidence for their arguments. When he began, it was in the early days of computers when the methods were pretty rudimentary. Now the use of quantitative analysis is common in many fields, but in the 60s and 70s, when my parents started using it in their work, the method was brand new in the social sciences. Chuck took his compelling curiosity, innovative methods, and creative analysis and turned them into 51 books and countless articles. In the last few decades of his life, he was publishing about a book a year, a breathtaking pace, while continuing to teach. He had incredible discipline and energy as well as talent, usually working a 12-hour day, 6 or 7 days a week. In the last couple of decades of his life, he was typically in the office by 6:30 in the morning and would work into the evening with a few breaks for meals and sociability. He worked at home and at the office surrounded by hundreds of books and usually with classical music, opera, or jazz blasting from a nearby stereo. Even as play was work, much of his world traveling was connected with conferences, speeches, or meetings, and many of his friends were former students and colleagues. I'm probably telling you very different things about my father than he would have told you about himself, being a pretty modest and private person. He would have had funny stories to tell you about his days at York High School and probably would have mesmerized you with his beautiful, deep voice. Heck, he may even have sung the York High fight song with you. But I think he would have been honored to receive this recognition, and I thank you on his behalf.